And sorry, let me say this is probably one of the most controversial things around AI, right? That people don't like to say. And I'll say it now. Leave that argument about soul. People's like, oh yeah, the AI art, it just doesn't have soul. It's not the same thing. It's not true. Soul is such an abstract concept in the abstract world of art that it makes no sense. Art is subjective. How can you define soul? How do you quantify soul? Even the abstract nature of art is part of whatever the artist decides is what they were creating. You can't tell. And what is so mind-blowing, I guess, is the fact that even if you say that AI art doesn't have soul, it's still based off of human art.
Welcome to the show, Nkasiobi.
Pleasure. Thank you for having me.
When I first came across your brand and your personality, right, I actually was very intrigued because, I would not say quite rare, but it's quite inspiring to see people that are practically applying emerging technologies in like real ways that everyone can relate to. Before we jump into your core personality and your core focus, I would like to know how you, what actually inspired your love of arts and music.
Okay, that's a really good question. Even though I don't know that there's a real answer to that, I think like many things, we grow into them, we pick them up unconsciously, and if there's something that has been around you for the longest, it's really tough to know at what point that became a thing or if it was inherently there. But that's a question I'll leave for the philosophers. But I think that for a long time in my life, I've always been around art. I always liked it. I think I always gravitated towards it. So I think being raised how I was, I lived a very diverse life, especially in the context of even just space in Nigeria, right? I was born in the north. I was born in Kaduna. We moved to Lagos a little bit later. I schooled in Abuja, then in Enugu, and then I moved to Owerri, and I was schooling for uni in Enugu. So it's like I've always had like a perspective of life that takes a little bit of different things, and I was exposed to a lot very early. So I think that may have also just broadened my palette for like, knowledge and just experiences. So as I grew older, I would find that I had interest in like, say, maybe visual art. I used to draw when I was much younger. I mean, I can't draw now to save my life, but yeah, I make comics, in class. Then I picked up music by the time I was in maybe GSS3, SS1. I think that's when I stopped drawing because I started writing more songs. So I think that I've just found that I've always been very curious about things. But I think that the real talent maybe might just be the will to execute or to try. A lot of people think about a lot of things. Not very many people try. So I think that for me, art has always been around me. I think what just happened was that I had the nerve to just try things out.
I see. That's quite interesting. So what you just said now, at least for those listening, would be, even if you do not necessarily have the skill to execute, the passion to execute beats having that skill, because that would even push you to learn.
Every time, like they say, like hard work beats talent when talent fails to work hard. Like that saying is so deep even till today. It's one thing I think that's the biggest hack. If I had $1 for every time people told me some grand idea, if you think about it, some of the biggest projects in this world are not exactly the deepest ideas. Everybody has an idea. Everybody has something they think would be dope to make, but not very many people, take that leap of faith. And I think that's usually where it starts.
Interesting. What drew you to explore the creative potential of AI?
First, the nerdy side of my life, I cannot deny. I will only with my chest now. I've always been a nerd. I love anime. I love technology. I love all that lifestyle. So I think that I was always curious about what AI had to offer. Like a lot of people, I was worried about AI. I thought that AI was, out to take our jobs, and it had me scared. And this was the early days. ChatGPT was pretty new. There wasn't a lot of information. But I think that my curious half was at least stronger than my fear and my anxiety. So I wanted to figure out what was possible. We started to play around with it, and just like anything else, because I think that even how I've always approached creativity and technology has been the same. For those of us who are not Gen Z, we grew up in an era where there wasn't YouTube. We met in YouTube when we were young enough, but we existed before YouTube. And that's how I learned stuff like music production. I was self-taught. So I've always been open to the possibility of finding tools that I didn't understand and tinkering with it long enough to you figure out how, what makes it work. So essentially, the same thing happened with AI. It was like, okay, what can these things do? Okay, if I can do this much with this and that, how about I put this other two together? And sort of, I think it was just that same creative process to say, okay, what can we make out of this? And somehow along the line, it started to make sense. Then maybe I think the more adult half of me, who is like a business-minded person, started to think about what a real process would look like with that in mind. I think that's exactly how I got, here, and started to explore AI essentially.
So what key AI tools would you say were significant in introducing you to AI? Not necessarily what you utilize fully now, but those key AI tools. I know many people will say ChatGPT, for example. So was that one sort of tool that was really inspirational to you?
Absolutely, because of just how diverse it is. Even though we can argue now that they've watered down ChatGPT, but let me leave that conversation for some other thing. Yeah. But you know what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about.
Yeah. So for that one, I think it's two things. First and foremost, yes, there was a time when we felt like they watered it down, especially if you are not paying.
Yeah.
If you are not the $20 paying customer. There's also the other part where my personal opinion is the model itself probably just kept getting worse and worse and worse. I received that feedback online, like after seeing other people's chats. I can't quite put my hands on it, but Gemini that just came out is actually very good. I don't know if you've tried Gemini out. That's bad.
Bad.
Yeah, their Gemini is really, really, really
I've been seeing reviews.
Right. So I just hope it does not get worse progressively. But I don't think there's like a conscious thought behind it to water it down. I just think it's the model itself.
Possibly. I mean, same thing happened with Adobe's podcast tool, the audio enhancing one. My personal experience is that the first time I tried out that tool, the entire rationale was you put in, poorly recorded audio, maybe from your cell phone or something, and it does more than noise cancellation and improves the audio to make it feel like it's a studio recording. I was mind blown the first time I tried it out. I have pieces of music that was recorded with voice notes that I improved using the AI tool. But the last maybe 5 times I've tried using the AI tool, I did not use the final audio because it just wasn't it for me. And it felt like it sort of just wasn't as great anymore. But the reasons why are quite complex, I guess.
Yeah, and software development is a process. And the reason I say that is maybe at the back end, they are tinkering some things to make things actually work. And in terms of, let's change this to like increase this feature, might also affect
something else,
effect across board.
True.
I think what's very, very important for any brand of such caliber would always be to listen to customers to get feedback. Continual feedback is very important.
Absolutely.
There's no way you build a product that is always 100% okay. And there's no way you build a product that you just leave and not try to touch some things to make it better and better, right? But continual feedback. And I think that's where many companies lack. I don't know if it is the internal politics that just shield them from external feedback, but if they take in more feedback, then they would adapt. Because Google Bard, for example, met ChatGPT. There was no way in hell it should have like superseded ChatGPT. They should have also
ChatGPT had the head start.
Exactly. And there is also no way you have like a person that is a sort of competitor that you don't try out that product.
So to your question about like what AI tools that I tried out, first and the ones that stood out the most to me, absolutely one of the ones that I felt like was most groundbreaking was ChatGPT, and especially because of just how it used language. I think that, yes, of course, using the tool as much as I have now, I've differentiated its technical capability from its ability to sort of essentially speak English, which I think was, kind of like what the biggest buzz around it was at first. But at the same time, I think it really expanded my mind in terms of what's possible. The next one would be somewhere between, I'll give it a mid-journey. I was impressed with DALL-E, but it wasn't so great and it didn't really knock me off my horse. But Midjourney, and this was at the time, we're still at version, I think it was version 4 at the time when I was really trying it out. And I think it was because of the amount of detail the art had, the diverse art styles. It pushed my mind. I'm somebody who is a huge fan of visual arts. I have friends who do amazing work with people from like animation studios in Nigeria all the way to like, the big ones like Warner and the likes of them. So it's like, I really appreciate that kind of content. And I'm like, this is a lot. And I think that maybe that's what was so scary about the AI tools. It was knowing how much time it takes to generate something like this on a proper day. And how in a moment you have so much detail, so much style. And I was just like, oh more. Like it just felt like, I think maybe that's everybody's fear, like we're useless now. It's like, what do we do after this?
It was confusing to a lot of people to see that a machine, when I say machine, I mean AI, is able to generate beauty to that extent.
Yes.
And not just beauty, quality, and not just quality, time too, very short time. There are certain arts that could have taken some humans, maybe even 1 year, and we would understand that, it took you 1 year for this. It's because of like your talent.
And detail.
So I understand the fear that many like creators would face.
And sorry, let me say this is probably one of the most controversial things around AI, right? That people don't like to say. And I'll say it now. Leave that argument about soul. People is like, oh yeah, the AI art, it just doesn't have soul. It's not the same thing. It's not true. Soul is such an abstract concept in the abstract world of art that it makes no sense. Art is subjective. How can you define soul? How do you quantify soul? Even the abstract nature of art is part of whatever the artist decides is what they were creating. You can't tell. And what is so mind-blowing, I guess, is the fact that even if you say that AI art doesn't have soul, it's still based off of human art. It still drew from things that existed. So how do you define that? And I think that when you think about it from a place of logic, leave the sentiments. I felt it. That's why I was the first to admit that I was scared. So I felt the fear. But at some point I'm like, okay, emotions aside, let's wear the thinking cap. What's really going on here? And I think that if we are unable to do that, we will truly never be able to like find a way forward. Our response will always be, oh, this is scary, let's shut it down. And then, what next?
I think many people will shout, this is scary, but the many people would not shut it down. And that is also the scary part. Because no matter how much we say this is destructive, there are some people that will see it through. One thing about human is how curious we are. If you leave a human in a room with a button and you say don't press, that human would definitely press it.
It becomes the one thing you want in your entire life.
It might take a year. So I think saying we should not explore the potential of AI to the limits or to the extent to which we can is just saying, except if you are the one like right there that can turn it off. But usually, if you are the one right there that can turn it off, you are more curious than you are scared, right? But as humans, I'm hoping that we are smart enough to understand the possible like negative repercussion that can come from like AI and try to put in things in place that can reduce the possible blowbacks that can happen. I am not for let's shut it down. It's not even possible. In fact, many people that say AI will take out certain jobs, that's true. And if you actually trace back to every innovation that has happened in human history, people have always predicted this would take a lot of jobs. Vehicles came, maybe horse riders would need to go.
Yeah.
Even horses would need to
somebody was taking care of those horses. Somebody was breeding them in large numbers because there was demand for horses.
Exactly.
When last did you ever see a horse and say to yourself, I need to buy a horse this year? It's like, no, but
except if you are rich. So
even at that, you buy 5 cars first before you buy 1 horse.
Yeah, but it became something exotic.
Yeah.
So I actually think that when it comes to quality of art created, I don't think when we get to a stage, humans will be able to beat AI. I don't think so. So humans that are able to create art, it will become more exotic than AI because AI can create in abundance. But humans that can create would become like a sort of exotic talent. So an AI art, for now, it might be selling very expensive. That's because AI is just entering the market. But when it's proliferates, when it actually invades the market completely, where anybody can just generate any quality of art at any time, then humans that can actually generate that quality of art, their art will go for more. So those
I don't agree with that take.
Why not?
Personally, just for the record, I see it, but I think that it's the chance that I think it's almost 50-50. In my opinion, I would say 60-40. Like, and 60% to say that people might just not value the art as much. The truth is just the economics of it. If something is in abundance, it just wouldn't be valued so much. And the idea would be that when you say that, you know, the human art to be preferred is, could you even tell it apart? You know, like, what is it? Or is it because if they say that this one was done by a human being, or
exactly,
you then hire somebody, say, okay, I don't know, I'll sit in this room and the world will watch me paint this thing, and then go. Okay, I agree, but there'll just be barely, I don't know how many people doing it at that stage.
Exactly, that's my point about it being an exotic skill, something that the rich would run after. And I don't just see it in terms of art, in terms of creating like pictures alone. I actually see it across board. So shoes, for example, there are probably factories now that can create shoes in abundance. People doing it by hand are more expensive.
It's handcrafted.
Yes, exactly. Handcrafted belts, handcrafted this, handcrafted that. It becomes more exotic. But back to reality, right? What are some of the early projects that you actually worked on? Could be one or a couple that's actually pushed you more to say, this is actually something. It does not matter if you failed in that project, but it must have been an area that you can touch to and say, this project was actually something that has pivoted me to this.
Okay, so but when you say this, we're talking about the AI, within AI, or just
AI
general? Okay, so
art,
with art, I have a very, very long history with art. So it would be hard to even start the story because I've been making, at least professionally, within the space of film, music, and just this creative space, at least well over 10 years, leaning towards 15. So everything from music production, you know, songwriting, recording as a recording artist, also the rapper, I've done a lot. You know, maybe even working for brands, creating commercials. I've done commercials for a lot of, you know, the major telcos and other brands and FMCG. So, but I think as it relates to at least this part, I think that with the AI tools and let's just call it the emerging technology tools, right? Some of my curiosity was around one, virtual reality, or let's just say extended reality, as the case might be, interactive visual content creation, and then maybe a bit of AI was after the fact, right? But I think something that was interesting enough, and maybe I'm processing this as I'm thinking about it, I'm speaking about it. So I had a music project. I'm laughing because this is something most people don't know about me. So I'm about to cast myself while I'm answering this question. In 2020, I decided to explore my love for electronic dance music. And I wanted to make more of it. Now, this is something that most people don't know about me because most people who know me as a musician have a longer history within hip-hop. I've made a lot of rap records, I've done battle raps, I've won a lot of awards within that space. And I thought it would be weird if I started putting out a lot of EDM songs. So I had a few things produced. I was just in this phase where I was enjoying a lot of David Guetta, Black Coffee, Prince KB. I wanted to make that kind of music. And I said, if I put this in out, my fans were very confused. Everybody like, what's doing this guy? Like, it's okay in bits and pieces, but I wanted to do it and make like a whole album. So I created another personality and put out the music under a different name. So essentially in 2020, I put out 2 albums. One as Eclipse Nkasi, which was a rap album, and then one as a name called Cryomatic, which had never existed before. And I started to build his own fan base, and people liked it. But I didn't put my face behind it because people didn't know it was me making the music. Now, where I'm going to with this is that at the time, I convinced myself that I wanted to take a page from the playbook of the band called Gorillaz, in the UK. You know, they create like animated content and they sing, but in reality, just one guy in the band, or like 2 people, between the guy who used to be in Blur and one other guy who animates. But the band is presented as though there's like a group of people working on the project. Now, this now meant that I needed more images, image generation. I needed a lot of stuff that was harder to reach because I would have to hire visual illustrators who were very expensive, you know, animators who are really, really expensive. The good ones charge you anywhere from right now, maybe somewhere between 4 to 5 million naira, per minute of content. And that's if it's like 2D cutout animation. It's like, and it can go all the way higher than that. So essentially, the point is, the project did good, did okay. We had pretty decent numbers, like 100,000 streams on its first month of release. I was impressed. Not a huge marketing budget behind it, but I didn't get to do it to the extent that I wanted because I couldn't breathe life into the character I created because it was too expensive to execute on. By the time I would, times would turn and the AI tools would come on, and I started exploring image generation and the music I was doing, and I think that the thought process of what I wanted to do with the AI tools was already in place because of this other project that didn't live to its whole fruition, essentially, because I didn't do it how I wanted to do it, but the AI tools helped me understand what I could use it or that project helped me understand what I could use the AI tools to do. So essentially, by the time I would get to creating music with AI, then that's why we had there's a character that I created in the process of working on my AI album called Maya Blue. Maya has like her own music thing going on and all of that. It's essentially the same rationale for what I wanted to do with Cryomatic. It just was easier to do with Maya. And even though we haven't even, put up more music for Maya since last year, Maya's followership keeps growing every day. People still follow her on the page. People still interact with the video. It's easier now with as little as, let's say, for example, you're using DID to take a generated image from, Midjourney, and then you take voiceover from 11 Labs, and then next thing she's talking. The point is, as simple as that is, that's more than I could have possibly created just 2 years before that. And now look at the work that people are doing with like maybe Wonder Dynamics in terms of motion capture using mobile phone footage. Like, it's just ridiculous how much more we can do. And I think that that's like one project that's very, pivotal in my own process and journey. Now that I think about it,
let's speak about Maya Blue. I was going to get to Maya Blue, but since you mentioned, I won't say but maybe
it's fine. It's hard because
people would be pissed that a software or like an AI personality is not human. But I beg to differ. I mean, in an age where humans are deciding their own pronouns, I guess AI too can identify as her. I actually have an interesting question around this, but I don't want to deviate, but I'll come back to it.
Right.
I think I should ask it now so I don't forget. And that would be, if AI creates music, who should own the rights to that music? Do not answer that now.
Okay,
Let's talk about Maya
cool.
and the sort of creative thoughts or push that went into creating that and the ripple effects from creating that.
Okay, so one of the beautiful things about Maya as a project is that it wasn't premeditated. Everything I did in that project, I was really exploring. And even though I tried to film some parts of our process, I didn't have everything figured out. I'd worked with some tools, but I was in the middle of making the album when I found the tool that allowed me generate Maya's voice for singing. Because at the time, I didn't have any tool that allowed me control, properly generate singing voices. It was easy to find voiceovers, like just talking voices. But it was harder to get the AI to sing specific things. So I think that as we were just trying things out, we very organically created a song where we could create vocals. And then I was telling the guys, I was like, look, people will still debate this. So because I was doing an experiment, I wanted to be as organic as possible. So let's create a song that's primarily the AI singing. You can say they can, then people can worry about that whole argument of, is human or not. Then we did the first version. And at this point, we didn't even have a name. So the song has me also singing on it. And that was just because I wanted to push that a step forward. And I said, it's not enough that I'm going to make the AI sing. Let's make it a duet. So that I sing a bit and she sings a bit. So which means you will literally have like sort of like a small A/B testing going on where it's like, this is the human being, this is the AI, but can you still tell the difference, in real time? And we did all of that. And by the time we're done with the project, everybody was pumped. I was working on the track list and I realized that this song features, in quotes, a voice that isn't credited. And it does a lot of work on the entire project. People would say, who's the artist?
Exactly.
And who's that going to be? And then I had to start figuring out a name. So as much as you guys might not like it, but I went back to ChatGPT. I went through a bunch of names and then narrowed it down to Maya Blue somehow.
So at the end of the day, the AI artist was named by an AI.
Yep.
There was human behind making the key decisions, but it is almost end-to-end an AI process. I wonder whether we would come to a time when an AI would actually be the one to initiate the thought process itself up to the time that the album is released.
I think it's not very far away because it's just a question of automation.
Exactly.
And I think that it's something that we can do now if it's not already being done. And let me just throw in one small, I feel like just to make this very interesting, one more conspiracy. There's a beauty to conspiracy theories. I'm sorry. But when they are grounded. There were a lot of businesses that were using AI tools before AI as a term became very commercial and popular. But it didn't say it was AI. They didn't announce that. So which means that we were consuming content that we thought was human generated, but it wasn't.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
And I will not call names because I don't know how people are going to take this. So it's not like I'm accusing anybody in particular, but I would say this. There were, especially in the space of music with regards to publishing and specifically synchronization, which is, use of music for video content. So the platforms that were offering you access to music for your videos or podcasts as background music was not human generated. They were not human created. So I didn't, of course, know this till when I was deeply searching for AI tools that could generate music compellingly, because in the early days, there were not very many options. And I stumbled on some random, excerpts from some forums, and a brand was mentioned. And I Googled, searched, couldn't find it. And I'm like, maybe be Agba Googler. I cannot find it. But I stumbled on one page that somehow, I don't know how they left it up somewhere, that made me understand that one of the major companies had bought over this AI company and then taking their website down. But it made sense considering what the big company was into, which had to do with, video, music content. So if you guys bought them over, took down their site and absorbed them, we know why you did that, and with that in mind, I'm just saying that when it comes to thinking about what you need for that to happen, so let's use, for the sake of this conversation, let's use YouTube. Even though YouTube has already, I think a good example because YouTube has already shown what they're doing with AI. So I'm not accusing YouTube of anything. We know what YouTube is doing. So they're good examples. So this is just my idea. YouTube, arguably, in the eyes of music consumers, has the most sophisticated recommendation algorithm for music. People think it's the closest to what you want, which means the system has truly understood most of its users. If they have a system that can also generate music, which is AI created, and already knows what you want based on what you've been listening to, it can very easily make new music for you and serve you without you knowing it. So which means in the middle of all that playlist that you enjoy, it will be like, yeah, you have this Ashake lined up and you have Timi Dakolo next, but then there's a small gap between Ashake's tempo and Timi Dakolo. How about I generate one nice random song that's a little slower, not too slow, but usher you into the next song?
Is that dystopian in any way? Should people be worried?
Depends on what side of the table you're sitting. I don't think so. I think for the consumers, it just mean more content they can enjoy. For the artist, one of the worries that I share personally with AI is that I don't know how much room it would give for newer artists to come into play. No matter how much people keep saying that, it's just a new way to make music. And I think so. And I've said it that I think one of the first things that will happen with AI and music is that it will become very social. It'll be like TikTok. The way we're able to stitch videos, remix videos, just edit and tweak it to suit our own personal needs and then repurpose and repost. That's what we'll be doing with music, because we'll be able to do more now that you don't have to be an instrumentalist to generate sounds, and that's leaning towards what YouTube is doing with their with the DeepMind project. One of the music, half of it is saying that you can now essentially generate music in the voices of any of these artists. You just prompt it like it's ChatGPT and it would create the mood, create the instrumental, and it would be maybe T-Pain's voice. So it'll be finished content. Even though right now it's only open to a select number of curators. But what's going to happen in 5 years' time?
Let's bring this back to you being a creator and you've utilized or leveraged these tools to a large extent.
Yeah.
How big do you think Maya Blue has been, and what is the goal?
I think that Maya has tickled the world's fancy. And I say that because it's like people are curious, people are excited. And I mean, it was one thing to have just been in the middle of nowhere in Lagos working on that project to being featured on CNN and being run repeatedly because everybody wants to talk about Maya. And I think that in the beginning, I thought it was because I created this amazing album But halfway through, when I started getting calls from several, journalists, the questions always came down to Maya Blue, Maya Blue. It was clear that's the part of the project they were most interested in. But in terms of what she can be, I think it's limitless. The goal for me is to do more. But essentially, I think I always want to keep it transparent. So even literally in her bio, it's there. I'm an AI generated artist. So it's not like we're pretending to be what we're not. But for now, Maya remains to me what she was when I started, an experiment. There's no clear thing I'm chasing. Every time I think about something that we could do to improve on the output, I will try it out to see where we can get to. I haven't done too much because I'm not as impressed with what we have. But it was out there right now. But we did create some interesting music that should be out in a couple of months. And I think that's also something that begs another new possibility. And I think maybe my stir conversation, I think I can say this now publicly because we're close to release date. But we worked on a remix to the song Joromi by the late Nigerian legend Sir Victor Waifo. And the remix features Maya Blue. And it's an official remix. It's not like we just did something in the background. We have license with the label that owns Victor Waifo's masters. We worked together, we reproduced the song, we got Maya's verses written and then generated and then merged everything together. So we're getting to a space where people are reaching out to work with Maya like any other artist to say, we're working on some music, want to feature your artist. And maybe that's the next step now, because on her coming into her own. And that's why I also didn't want to just rush and do all the gimmicky things, to see how much authenticity can we build around these types of brands. And hopefully as we go along and we're able to crack things like, image generation with regards to consistent, faces that don't seem too far off. It's not far away. It's not as if we can't do it.
That's already been accomplished.
That's what I say.
Yeah, I think there are also some Instagram. Yeah, there are some Instagram like I came across some news where there were some Instagram influencers. They found out that the whole account is actually AI generated.
Same approach. But the goal for me now is some level of dynamism, because there's still certain restrictions around how the image works. But it's nothing out of reach. So essentially, we would reach for more music creation from her, maybe at some point an entire album, and then what's it called? Some actual celebrity influencer work. But it's just that for now, even the process to generate her singing voices is quite tedious. I don't think I enjoy it enough to do an entire album. So I'm taking my time with it.
That brings me to my next question, which was, how do you use AI to generate music? Like, can you explain the process, especially to creatives out there, not the ones that are hoping to copy you, but the point...
It's always the ones hoping to copy and listen. They're like, pen and paper.
But the point still is... I don't think there's any true innovation if that innovation cannot seep out. Even if it is not, I'm not talking about people to copy, but people that are also to be inspired. I think you'll be surprised by people that by just explaining your creative process, even the one that you say you don't enjoy, for example, by just explaining that, it will inspire them to actually take up mantle. Yeah. So my question actually is, how do AI help in creating music? How do you use AI to create music? And what are the benefits and downsides? When I say downsides, I don't even mean like how it affects the society. You can still speak about that, but some of the downsides you face.
Yeah, the drawbacks.
The drawbacks process, in creation.
Okay. I mean, maybe it's even good we talk about it now, because if I ever was going to share my process, then it's better on a platform that is dedicated to the space. Because before now, I discuss these things in very general agnostic platforms that may not necessarily understand the depth of what I'm saying. But first, I think the process with Maya became, because we tried a few things, then stayed away from some things that didn't work. But what we've been doing in the early days was, one, testing out if we could write lyrics with, like, say, ChatGPT. Then for backing music, you have to figure out instrumentals. And then we had tools that we had tried out, like SoundRaw, and lately Ava, the AI. But then sometimes we're open to actual productions, to keeping producers in the studios, because it may not always be what we want, fully. So sometimes we take excerpts. Like when I was working on the album, one of the songs I always make reference to is a song called Ifu, in bracket, Men the Bad. The entire song was largely produced by humans, but the guitar loop that we're working with was AI generated. I heard the entire thing. I liked the guitar. I didn't like the other things I had. So I kept just the guitar and then improved on it. And that's a good example of where the AI thing just inspired me more than anything else. But in this case, let's say we get the instrumentals, which are the easy bits. We have lyrics written. Then we start to create melodies around that to see how to make it work. For some people, that's not a big deal if that's their process, because creatively, people work differently. Although lately, and from my experience, most creatives in music like to get the instrumental first, and they try to make melodies to it and write lyrics as they go along. If you give them finished lyrics, it makes it a bit tedious, but it's not impossible. You can just take excerpts and bend. But the point now is that songwriting can be AI generated. Sometimes we'll have human revisions, but then we have always had to create the melodies ourselves to make sure it works. What we then do is we use the tool we use. We play it as MIDI first. So which means when we're done producing, whatever we're singing, we have to play it out with the keyboard. So we can have the musical notes and progressions for the singing. So if, say, for example, my singing, it's like, in every trial and tribulations, you have to play and get all those notes arranged. So that's what we then are able to convert into our voice. That's how the system knows what to sing. So it's not like we just throw in the song and somehow it magically just comes out. So it's like, and then we now have to sit down and write words to each note that we have played out. In every trial and tribulation. And it's tedious because you're almost not even writing word for word. Sometimes you're writing based on syllables, especially if it's a word that the syllables move musically. Some things can stay on the same note. Some will change. Tribulations changes. So you have to write that separately. Then some of the drawbacks, besides the fact that it's tedious, is that you realize that so phonetics comes into play. Some words don't sound the same when they are broken apart. So let's say, for example, I don't know what would be a good example, but I can't remember one. But let's just say bot, BOUGHT. And for some reason, if it's bot, once you separate BO and maybe you spell GHT separately, it will pronounce it as something else, exactly, on its own. But if it's part of the whole world, it'll be pronounced. So between that and having to find ways to spell the remaining half of a word when you find it in isolation, to get the system to pronounce it properly, those are like some of the things that just make it a lot harder. So it takes quite some time to sit still and just go through that process and truly understand what you're trying to create and then get the finished version. Then we have to get extra creative if you want to do backups, because I think that's something that we did better on the Victor Wifo collabo. With the first song on the album, when I did for Maya, there's really no real backup because I didn't have the mental space to do that over and over again. But for the Victor Wifo one, we had harmonies, so which means we took our time to replay so that we can do backing vocals. So essentially, like, that was the process for that, and that's what we're doing because we wanted as much control as possible. So the goal now is to find more efficient ways to do that and be able to achieve our goal at a faster pace, essentially.
So I think I have two things to say about that. Right? Yeah. The first thing is, I know why I am not an AI music producer, because I actually found a tool, I don't know how long ago, maybe 3 months ago or something, yeah, and it says, oh, this is an AI tool that can actually generate music for you. And all you have to do is just put maybe a sentence and it's going to generate. I was already inspired that, oh, come on, I'm going to make something awesome and I'm going to push it out. After putting in the sentence, it came out okay, but just below mid, okay. You explaining this process now also got me to think that, yes, people are saying like AI is coming to disrupt this, it's coming to disrupt that, but it's also still take skills and efforts to be able to execute. That's one. Second thing also is, yes, it could phase out some jobs, but these are new jobs being created. The process you went through to actually piece this together, I believe in, let's say 6 months from now, it could actually be something where a person can say, my job description is an AI music editor or something, an AI music producer.
And oh, by the way, just to add, I think one beautiful advantage about things like this is that the people who are producers or songwriters that don't have the voice to sing. So if you know music theory, this gives you the chance to actually make music. although some people also market it as an opportunity to run drafts by artists to say, if I had a song idea and I didn't really have the voice, I can just use this to flesh it out and then share it with you. So you know what the song really sounds like and decide if it works for you. At the same time, like I said, you can decide that, you would get a voice bank, just like Maya, and then or maybe you get a different voice and say, okay, this will be the voice you work with, and you'll be able to create your own music, going forward. The opportunities are quite, interesting. It's just that people now start to wonder when you think about like the whole thing, if it's all connected. So let's say, for example, this might not be how it would work, but just say in theory that I did this and I said, okay, I had this song and I figured it out. I'm a producer, maybe I can't really sing, and I think it's great. And I'm like, I think this will work for Davido, and I send it to him and he likes it. The truth is that with AI now, you can just clone Davido's voice and just convert that straight to Davido's vocals. So you realize that
he will be pissed.
Yeah, you get it. No, but imagine if his team was working with you on that, and maybe he's on tour. So by the time he's done, because the idea is that most artists don't write their music, right? You have songwriters, there's writing camps. Even the ones who write, they have to create all this content and then you review. So when you're on tour, your A&R is working, is putting writing camps together and music is pieced together. Essentially, you can just come back and say what you guys have, and they play you a bunch of songs. Like, okay, I like this one, this one, this one, this one, and they just go ahead and somebody else is in charge of cloning your vocals and turning that to your voice, and album is ready. And the artist didn't have to record a second of any of it, But what that then means for us, it's a different conversation. But you can still see how it means that your faves would be on point, back to back with content.
I just can't imagine what that would look like. Say you pick an artist, you are helping them create music, and you cloned their voice and you sent it to them, and they come to the realization that even if I sang this, would I be able to beat the AI?
But copy? See, let me just say this now. But that was what was happening with Autotune. We know, and people accepted it. We know that if you turn off the Autotune, this person doesn't sing this good. They don't hit these notes this correctly. But we've accepted it so much that even literally as a sound engineer right now, it's required that if you are mixing a pop vocal, you should add small Autotune just so for the consumer, it feels like what they hear on radio. That's become the standard for pop music. So even if the person doesn't need it, you just put small, so it just has that small feel on top of it. And that's what's happening. So we have pretty much all of, like most every other artist right now will sound quite different when they're performing live from the recorded version of the song. And even though now they can even put Autotune on live performances, that's a different conversation. But my point is that the thing is people consume stuff enough. At some point, they just accept or create a certain section in their mind for it. And it won't matter as much. Because after all, the artists that we love so much, they're not really the personality they sell to us. They're not really the music they sell to us. They're not really the styling. Some people literally have, everybody picks out their outfit for them. So their look. Some people down to their background story. Oh, when I was young, I was selling fish for my mother. It's a lie. Because the marketing team decided that you needed a sub story. And you came up with one sub story and then that was your brand. So it's like...
Okay, so what this means is the innovation is coming, whether you like it or not.
Facts.
The customer is the king. That's the people listening.
Yeah.
So if at the end of the day, if the AI generated one is what the people listening would like to consume, then it would be against your own self-interest as an artist to not adapt.
Speaking of which, something just crossed my mind. One interesting thing that happened with Maya was that last year at some point we put up an Instagram poll and we said, just that normal thing in your stories, we're like, oh, ask me anything. And also Maya's and people just started asking Maya questions and we just answer. So and then it occurred to me, I was like, we're going to answer it. I was like, we're going to be answering everybody's questions. And I said, no, let's prime ChatGPT. So I went and put because we had a proper bulky prompt where we had worked, and we worked with ChatGPT still to create a personality for Maya. So there's a base idea and everything and rationale. Then use that and then said, okay, we'll go on and be sharing you questions. Then you answer as Maya. So essentially, we don't have to bother ourselves. People just ask anything, we paste it in ChatGPT and it generates responses. But of course, like you said, we have to, as creators or people who are pushing these things, we have to be careful and set some sort of guardrails. So I did also add to the prompt and let ChatGPT know that if any question is too personal or is bordering on any sensitive topic, you should feel free to use humor and wit to deviate. So that way the personality is designed such that it's fun, it's loving, there's all the whole backstory. And then if you ask anything that is, maybe too explicit, it would not engage head on. And it was a pretty interesting exercise. So from people who were, guys who were asking Maya if she has boyfriend, the ones that said that they love her, if she went to date them, to young girls sending messages to say, oh, I'm interested in singing. What tips do you have for me? Blah, 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 blah. And I just realized maybe that's another thing people want from these brands, because we're really toying with the idea of setting up some dedicated chat platform for Maya over time so that people can engage. And I think that's the beauty of it. It's the personalities, it's the brand. And it just, in this case, it's completely AI generated. So even Maya's backstory, even the whole thing.
So that raises some ethical questions, which brings me to my next question, actually. So my next question is separated into two, but I'll ask the first one first.
Yeah.
So what do you think the ethical implications would be for the application of AI in arts? When I say art, I mean music focused. So what do you think the ethical implication would be?
I think that I would answer that on two layers. And off the bat, I would say there's a part that nobody knows just yet, and we're still debating. But the first thing is what we're doing, which is trying to see how much human contribution we can keep in the ecosystem in terms of even how the art is generated, how it's directed. And then, ultimately, I think the clarity of where these pieces of art are coming from also helps. So people also understand. That's why like I said, with Maya, we've always made it clear that this is what this is. It's AI. You get, but there are people who are comfortable enough to interact. And then ethically also, you now set the tone by upfront discouraging certain kinds of exchanges, essentially. Like using the chat example, if I let people ask inappropriate questions, it would lead down an rabbit hole that we don't want, but since we already set a context like that and someone now says to Maya like, oh, I don't know what's like the most random thing. Do you get, maybe let's just say somebody decides to be a genius and says, oh, Maya, what's the freakiest thing you've ever done? You probably get a response that borders around. She'll be like, I don't know, but I think that I find music to be like the wildest thing I would always explore, and my love for music will always be some weird segue. That way you kind of keep things together and you make sure that the tools are not abused. But I think that's like the best way that I would approach it, especially with music. But then the last thing will now be, which kind of begs on the first point, but as we develop, as we go further, let's try as much as possible to keep the creators in mind. Let's try as much as possible to find ways to keep this all rooted in a system that will benefit us all. Unfortunately, like you highlighted in the beginning, the people who are truly at the helm of affairs, one, will not stop. Secondly, their interests are not our interests. Recently there was a whole debate about TikTok and Universal over the whole, use of his music and everything. And Universal's statement was that they were looking to protect the artist. People can always argue that might not be the case. There's been a lot of issues that have been highlighted in the past with UMG and how his contracts are set up. But all I'm trying to say is that I don't know for a fact, what's really at stake. But I know that more often than not, when these decisions are made, it's not like they come and contact the artist and say, all the artists on our label got a memo saying this is what's going on. Send in your thoughts. And then they did a poll. And then based on what the artist wanted, this is what they're doing.
My next question in relation to the ethical question is actually, how do you see the music and arts ecosystem in Africa and globally being affected by the introduction of this technology, be it AI? So how do you see the ecosystem being affected, be it in the next 10 years or so?
Okay, in the short term, the biggest advantage that these AI tools have given us, especially in Africa, is lower the barrier to entry. So many things that cost an arm and a leg are more affordable now. More people can try. And that's like the first thing I was saying, like just try. Give something a shot. It gives everybody a chance to just try and be a bit more creative. You up production value on things. Content is quicker. Content looks better just because you have tools that just make it easier. And even though these AI tools are not free, some are not cheap. But the cost of whatever they are enabling you to do or whatever they're replacing is always a lot higher than what you have to pay at this time. So I think that's one of the things that we're going to get a chance to try. Everything from even if it's in its current form. One of the things that I'm looking to explore, because and by the way, this might be a good time to mention, shameless plug, but we're building a small community of people who are within the creative space, are interested in emerging technology. And right now, as it stands, I was thinking maybe I might even put down a bit of my own personal money to train and encourage people to contest for AI-based filmmaking content. Not because this is going to rival what we have in the cinemas, but I think that even for filmmakers, it would be a good way to create let's call them MVPs, to justify ideas that you have. So people start to think about their craft differently. So even when you're building treatments, instead of just saying, I have one story that I want to shoot, one boy that was selling bread, but then now you can sit down and for a few dollars generate images, nice transitions. Tools like CapCut are literally free and they're so helpful. Small voiceover in the back if you want, background music, and your potential investors can understand your vision and what you're trying to achieve. So essentially, all I'm saying is that these tools give us a chance to express ourselves better. In the long run, so that we're in a better position in Africa, I think that we would need more people who are playing on a technical level, in these conversations, because unfortunately, all these tools are developed elsewhere and we're just exploring them here. And we start to find, the data sets with which a lot of these models are trained don't usually have a lot of African context. Even if it's the music ones, even Afrobeat that is buzzing right now, if you type Afro, it'll be giving you, I bet you get Latin music, you get Mexican stuff, you don't really get African content. So until we start to do more for ourselves, even on that level, and we'll be able to truly harness it. And also, while we're hoping, like we said earlier, that the people who are at the helm of affairs make decisions that are better for us as humans, it doesn't always mean it'll be better for us with the African reality, with the current struggles that we have, So I just hope that that's something that would pan out. Unfortunately, it's not something any one person can do. Whether it's people within the government, creating more room for us to truly thrive. I think that people who are trying now, unfortunately, I would be real and say that Nigeria is still plagued with a system where most times it thrives until the government is involved. Once the government steps in, things always get shaky, and not because of the government itself is a problem, just the way we're used to doing things. So somehow we would need, that essentially I'm just saying that's the benefit we have today. In the long run, we're not sure. But for us to get to where we want to get to, we need more players on a private level. We need more room, on a government level. And hopefully we're able to achieve some level of these that gives a chance to succeed. I know we're not going to achieve the best version of it, because humans. But, that's what I think.
So from what you've said now, in the short term, a lot of people would actually have the chance to be able to leverage these technologies and enter the ecosystem or enter the market easier than before.
Yes.
And in the long term, we need to start thinking more sustainably in terms of having more AI models that are modeled after our personality, after our culture, after our kind of music, and after our kind of art, so that in the long run, we don't end up being somewhat secondary in the...
Yes, and even in terms of infrastructure and structure, because what would happen is that once everybody starts using AI tools, right, there's now, like you said, barrier to entry is low. There's a lot more people. There's a lot more content. But what do you do with the content? Because the current system and structure was not designed for AI tools and AI content. So it's like, we have a lot of this, but we don't know what to do with it now. We're in a world where people expect things to still be a certain way. So it would require the world around it really changing. And that's what we don't have enough of. So that's why, unfortunately, I don't even have the answer as to, how do we move the needle? Because even personally, for the projects that I'm invested in that have to do with extended reality and interactive video content, I face the same problem. You want to solve this, but to do this, we need, let's say, for example, resources and finances from investors or whoever it is. But the investor model says that they want to fund things that have proven track record. But this is new. There's no track record to prove. If you don't give me the chance to at least even try, we will never know. So it becomes that chicken and egg situation. And if I don't try enough, and there's not enough of us trying in several spaces, there will not be enough room. So it's like somehow someone has to find a way to, like you said, improve the models, improve this thing. Somebody has to be thinking about the platform itself. are we going to now say, okay, let's use music for example. Are we going to say, okay, we're going to deviate from our current system of music logging and start building something that's based on, let's say, for example, the blockchain, to say essentially we want to have a way to track where every piece of music comes from. So if it's AI generated, we have a way to track it. Now, YouTube has a new model for how they're trying to watermark songs using AI based on this new tool they're putting out. But from what I understand, I don't think it's still foolproof, but I think it has. But the point I'm trying to make is we need that type of rationale. And if we're talking about doing it in Africa, we need to be able to do it on both ends. So it's just mind-boggling.
And as you said, key stakeholders, especially those that are supposed to be sponsors, those that have the money, those that have the resources, they need to be more open-minded to emerging technologies.
Facts.
They need to be more open-minded to emerging technologies. If not, they are going to draw all of us back. They might think that it is them saving their money by not investing. But in 5 years, it is all of us being backwards. So you need to be more open. You need to try out new things. We know that
brands should be open to R&D.
Exactly.
If I got $1 for, and I said this at the FinTech week, and I told them, I said, you should not drag me, but
are we almost done?
So I said this at the FinTech week, and I know I was shaking tables, but I was like, if I got $1 for every time some brand, especially like the banks, would be like, oh, driving innovation, and you go to them and say you want to raise money for something innovative, they don't care. That system is designed to back projects that are not innovative, the ones that are working now, not the one that is new markets that nobody's playing in. No, so it's backwards. Essentially, more people need to be open-minded. R&D say, look, hey, figure this thing out. It's okay to fail, but fail fast and fail forward and say, okay, how do we make this make sense? So there's only so much, we can do as individuals, but that's all we have so far. Today I wake up and somebody calls me and says, oh, hey, I have 30 billion for you to use and do this thing. But I mean, till that day. Okay. And it's not even just about me alone.
Okay. In the spirit of rounding up, I think we should bring this back to the question I asked. Okay. So in the spirit of rounding up, I think we should bring this back to the question I asked initially. When we do get to a time when I know that many people might believe AI would never be conscious. I will leave that to the actual experts. I will leave that to the actual experts to discuss that or provide proof that it would never be. But I'm of the mind that it could be. Because there's one thing that I know in this world. If it moves like a duck,
and it quacks like a duck, then it is a duck.
It is on its way to becoming a duck, right? And imagine how fast technology moves. 50 years ago, there are many gadgets here currently that would not have been thought it was possible. 50 years from now, where would AI be, right? So if we do come to a point where majority can accept that AI is conscious, and I say majority because I don't think there will come a time where everyone would accept, because I don't even think everyone accepts that everyone is conscious self, right? So there comes a time where majority accepts that AI is conscious. And AI does create art. In your personal opinion, who do you think should own the rights to that art? Is it the person that created the AI itself, or the people that own the data sets by which that AI was trained?
Okay, I think that your question is warped in a way because you added that one caveat of if the AI was conscious or sentient. But I think that let me sort of answer it without the sentient part and then bring the sentient part back into it. Without it being sentient, as it is today, it depends on whatever paperwork is there. It's licensing, it's arts. People always have sold arts, and people have also waived rights. And even though currently the legal structure is such that copyright can only be held by a person of there's a term they used to describe an actual human being. Because in law, the companies are entities and humans too are entities, but they have a way to separate. It's called a natural person. That's the term I'm looking for, a natural person, right? But essentially, you can generate copyright as a natural person. You can sell it to a third-party entity like company and all that. But companies are still run by natural persons. The point I'm trying to make essentially is that the rights would always reside wherever we say it resides. if I create a company, I build an AI system, and I say, if you generate anything with my system, you will own the rights. Because there's some tools like that. They tell you, pay X amount of money and it's still our own. If you pay the next tier, you have the right. So it's transferred to you. But it always starts with the person that creates the system. But I think as we go along, it gets more convoluted. And people have to make the argument about data sets. And when it comes to data sets, there's two levels to it, especially with art. I will be calling out our industry when I say that art is usually based off of pre-existing art, even for us as humans. I think we underestimate this and overestimate our thinking ability when it comes to creativity. Everything we design is based off of something we've seen before. But somehow we still think it's, as long as it's sufficiently different, we call it original and then we want to own it. But when it came to AI, we suddenly forgot that system. It's so bad that if you try to learn visual art right now, try to draw, most of the tutorials online will tell you to stop drawing from imagination. They always recommend that you have references. You always pull up something to say, this based on this thing, I will try and adapt for that. And it's the same process. That's why AI is literally just mimicking human intelligence, just understanding how our mind works in a certain way and taking the same path. So essentially, a lot of the arguments is that you might not really rest, with those people. For example, I think it was China or so that's already passed a law where AI companies don't have to seek permission of people before they use their data to train AI models. So the point I'm trying to make overall is that, one, it will depend on these factors. Two, if AI does become sentient and for some reason it's still contained, it may still sit down on whatever we agree is how we classify the AI. If we still don't think it's human, we will treat it as though that it still will not have the right to own whatever it creates. And then it'll be down to whoever owns the AI. So that way, maybe people will think about it as products. So which means it's like a laptop. The laptop does the work for you, but you that bought the laptop, you use the laptop to, then that's your own property.
Essentially, cannot be a property.
But that's I said that, no, but we're dealing with human beings. So the thing now is that I believe human beings will always try. We've owned human beings, for God's sakes.
That's my point.
Do you understand?
We should learn from history.
But my mind is that we'll always see capitalism is a drug. It's deep. We will try. But the argument now will now become less about that and more about if we'll even be able to control the sentient AI system. And that starts to bring us into Terminator territory. You get so, and that's a different conversation. But as much as I can see and how much I can quantify, because I'm trying to answer within certain confines, because these are very deep waters and it's very open-ended. But within those confines, I think that's the best way we can approach it, And I know that as far as rights and ownership, even though there's people arguing, everything is AI should be marked AI. There's only so much you can know. There's only so much you can track. And like you said, the way the technology is growing so quickly, it literally reminds me of when ChatGPT launched. And they're like, oh, don't worry about it. There's now AI detector, an AI that will tell you whether it's AI written. AI detectors don't work anymore because AIs are getting better than their detectors. So it's like, it's just, I don't know, it's like we're just swimming in whatever this soup is. But I'm trying to be hopeful in that I know a lot of people are still working. People are trying to put the, guardrails in. And like many things in our entire history as a species, we've had to figure it out as we were going along. Sometimes it will cost us, and something about this, and this is now me putting back my, nerd cap on with my chest and saying, something about this is reminiscent of how I felt when I was watching Oppenheimer. Again, just looking at what they were on the cusp of in the context of the world at the time. They were testing out a nuke, essentially, like a weapon that potentially could have wiped out the entire world the day they tested it.
I had a conversation, I wanted to say argument, with a friend a week ago on this, and it was of the strong opinion that they should not have tested it. But I'm not of the opinion that they should have, but I told him that, like I said before, if you put a human in a room with a button, they would always press. They would always press the button. So
I thought about it, they're like, it's a 2% chance. I said, there's a chance that if we do this, we would wipe out the whole world. And even went ahead. We've always been gambling species. We've always been a gambling species. Don't worry about it.
That's why we are here. That's why we are the top
my God.
species. Thank you very much
Pleasure.
for coming on the show.
Pleasure.
I think I would really like to have you on again sometime because this conversation was awesome.